What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel Messianic Me TV. For today's video, I'm going to be answering a question that I've actually received quite a lot. But before we go ahead and dig into the video, if you're not yet part of the family, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because in this channel, we talk about things Torah, Halakha, Jewish thought, and more. If you end up enjoying this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up because it really does help the video and the channel. And of course, if you find that this video is share-worthy, make sure you share it with your friends and family. Alright, let's go. Alright folks, let's go ahead and dig right into it. For today's topic, I want to talk about exactly what you see in the title. Why did I not go the route of Orthodox Christianity? Many people get confused, especially because when you see my Instagram and the way that I talk about it, I always say Orthodox Catholicism. So they wonder, why do you say that and you don't mean the Orthodox Christian Church? It's a bit confusing. No worries, that's what we're going to dive right into today so that we understand what I mean. Firstly, what I mean by Orthodox Catholicism is basically true and authentic Catholicism. Of course, as many of you know, in any group that involves humans, there's always going to be some stray scragglies, some loose screws, some crazy apples. You know what I mean. So there's always going to be Catholics, which in reality would be better termed fake Catholics because they're just Catholics by name. So instead of classifying myself simply as Catholic or pursuing Catholicism, I like to add the thought of Orthodox to it so that whoever's viewing and listening can understand that what I mean is the true and authentic Catholicism that is really taught by the church and not someone's interpretation of it. Regardless of that, why didn't I choose to be an Orthodox Christian? I mean, it does seem like the easier route, right? There's no papacy, there's no crazy scandals, there's a less overarching authority structure hanging over your head. It just seems easier. At least that's what many people seem to think. However, let's go ahead and dive into the reasons. Again, these are my personal reasons as why I decided to go the route of Catholicism and not Orthodox Christian. I say this realizing that everybody at the end of the day is going to believe what they want to believe regardless of what facts they are presented with. And I'm not saying that if you choose something or something else that you don't understand the facts. It's just your interpretation of the facts and then you do with it what you will. As for me, there were a couple of things that actually leaned me towards Catholicism. And I want to start with the fact that in Orthodox Christianity, it seems to be a more regional type of structure. And what I mean by that is that most of these churches, for example, if you go to Russia, is catering to the Russian audience, if you will. If you go to Constantinople, you have that. If you go to the Coptics, you have that. If you go to the Greeks, you have something that's catered towards the Greek. And this involves the government structure, this involves the language, this involves the liturgy. And a lot of times, because of this, it seems to be very culturally based. This shouldn't be too much of an issue, considering the fact that obviously, if you go to the United States, you're most likely going to be going to an English-speaking church. And if you go to Japan, you're going to be going to a Japanese-speaking church. However, this goes further than just language. We are talking about complete cultures and the way that the scriptures are sometimes interpreted as well. When we go to the Orthodox churches, you can see that they are not one solid body, which is why I say Orthodox churches as opposed to the Orthodox Christian Church, because there isn't just one. Right now, one of the longest ongoing schisms that seems to be happening is that between Ukraine and that of the Church of Constantinople. They're struggling right now, and part of it has to do with the way that the Russian structure is so tied with their government. And I don't mean the church government, I mean the actual government of the country. This and other issues have caused them to kind of divide. And again, this causes an issue for anyone who is trying to say that their church is one, the Orthodox Church, because in reality, that structure doesn't exist. All of the churches are pretty much autonomous. They each have their own bishops and patriarchs. And although many times the patriarchs get together, some here, some there, they've never been able to call together a council. Nothing like what we saw in the ecumenical councils of the past. So even to this day, the Orthodox churches remain pretty much stagnant. And I know that tradition is super important. I mean, you're talking to me. You guys know me. I love tradition. But there are certain aspects that do require development. Language needs to be clarified, and according to the situations of the times, certain things need to be tweaked. Not in the doctrinal sense and nothing that has to do with dogma, but just how we approach certain matters of the day and age. Now, because of the lack of unity that we see in the Orthodox churches, it makes it difficult for them to unite and call up a ecumenical council or even a pan-ecumenical council. So that is my first issue, that it doesn't quite seem united to me as what one would expect when you hear the words of Yeshua when he said that he would have one flock. Another issue that comes for me is the issue of structure. And when I say that, I mean specifically authority. Contrasting the Orthodox Christian Church to the Catholic Church, where you have all of the bishops, but you have one supreme bishop known as the Pope. The Orthodox Christian churches do not have this. Again, they all have different patriarchs, and some of them are connected in certain ways, but in reality, they're quite separate in regards to one overarching authority. Now, for some people, this seems great. There is no overlord, if you will, but that's not what the Pope is supposed to be, and that's not the role of the papacy. The role of the Pope and the papacy is to be able to unite all Christians under one leader. And of course, many people will say, well, that one leader is Yeshua, isn't it? Sure, in the spiritual sense, but right now, let's be honest, Yeshua is not here physically to reign as king. That day is coming, but it is not here yet. And if you are a believer in Yeshua and you believe the scriptures, then you would believe the words that he said to Kepha. His name was Shimon, Simon first, but then he changed his name and he gave him a special role, the primacy amongst the other apostles. And throughout the history, this role, this supreme role for that bishop, was transmitted throughout the ages. And this goes down the line of popes all the way to today's day and age. And I understand that the role of the Pope bothers a lot of people, especially when you look down through history and you see that there were some really bad popes. And even today's Pope, Pope Francis, many people are divided about how they feel about him. Some people don't know if to love him or to hate him, basically, because he seems to say a lot of things that are quite ambiguous. And I do agree. Even for me, I have a lot of trouble with the things that he says, but I can't take away from the fact that he is an actual legitimate authority in the church. But why is this something that convinced me for the Catholic Church as opposed to Orthodox Christianity? For me, this was a convincing thing because the papacy is a symbol of unity for the church. It helps us to be able to have one physical anchor, someone that we can look up to unite and resolve matters. A lot of times within the churches, for example, like I mentioned before, they'll have disputes. And this happens even within the Catholic Church. Sometimes one bishop will feel one way, another the other. But this is where the councils come in, and this is where the Pope will come in and have the final say. And this is actually a great thing, because if you don't have that, if people disagree and they can't come to a conclusion by themselves, they're going to split. This is exactly what is going on with Moscow and Constantinople, unfortunately. Following this comes something that makes more sense to me coming from the Jewish background, and that is the fact that the papacy is also something completely historical. Some of you may have already seen my videos on the papacy, and if you haven't, go ahead and check those out. I go in a lot of detail explaining how the papacy really does come, not something just from Christianity, but from ancient temple Judaism. But just to give a little bit of background, the perfect example for this whole stewardship or role of the papacy can be seen in the book of Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 22, verses 15 to 20, around that area. This is where you have the pretty much wicked steward Shevna, who God replaces with the righteous Eliakim. And we know that this role that is given is a role, it is an office, which means it gets transmitted, and there is a continuation, just like the papacy. We see that this role is also kingly and priestly, just like the papacy. We see that this guy is the second in command in the kingdom, just like the papacy. Yeshua is the king, the pope is the second-hand man, and he's the one that's handling things here on earth. And there are way more similarities because that's where the papacy comes from. Make sure to check out my videos on that so you get a little bit more insight and all of the citations to be able to prove it from a historical, biblical, and logical sense. So then being able to see that the papacy really is something that is historical and biblical, when I look at the Orthodox Christian Church and I see the lack of that office, it makes me doubt whether this really is the kingdom of God. The church is supposed to be a kingdom. Yeshua said that the kingdom of God is here. And what is that kingdom? Where is it? The kingdom of God is the church. Our king is Yeshua, the Blessed Mother. If you know anything about Jewish and Israel history, you know that the mother of the king is the queen. By logic, since this is the kingdom of God and it follows the same example, that makes Miriam, Mary, the queen. There was a steward back in the day as well. That's the papacy. They also had a royal court, or the Beit Din Hagadol. And this is exactly what the magisterium is. Kingdoms also have laws and structure, and that is called Torah. And that's what we have. We have the instructions, that's what Torah means, instructions of how to participate in the kingdom. So it is a true, real kingdom. And because of that reason, when I look at the Orthodox churches, if anything, they might look like kingdoms, different ones, but they're not united. And all of these points together are basically the major reasons as why I do not go the route of Orthodox Christianity, but instead Orthodox Catholicism. Now, as I say this, if you are an Orthodox viewer, I want you to know that I completely respect you, and it's your decision to go where you're at. But if you haven't looked at these options before, it's something that I would suggest taking a look at again. And of course, if you have reasons that maybe you feel I should know about, go ahead and comment them below to know why you decided to be an Orthodox Christian versus a Catholic Christian. And if you are someone that came into Catholicism, anyone out there, please let me know why you decided to go the way of Catholicism as well and not Orthodox Christianity. All right, folks, that's my piece for this topic. I appreciate the questions you all send in because it does give me more topics to talk about. And if you have any other topics that you would like to converse about, make sure you leave them in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed week. Shalom.